when the Tiki Torch Nazis were marching around General Lee, Trump kept on bragging about General Lee, how he was a great general. In the same rallies, while he was bragging about General Lee, he kept on saying that the NFL players and the sports players kneeling were unpatriotic son of a bitches. And he kept on rubbing salt in the wounds of civil rights. Way before the George Floyd riots broke out, Trump was the catalyst that caused the riots to break out. Because ever since 2016, Trump was being in denigrating the civil rights of African Americans. So after Charlottesville Nazis, Trump kept on bragging about General Lee was a great general. He knew how to fight wars. Unfortunately, his last battle, he got caught on low ground, and you know how that went. Because he was bragging that General Lee always took the high ground when he fought battles. But unfortunately, his last battle, he got caught on low ground, and you know how that went. He said that at one of his rallies. Um, and he was animate, defending the Confederacy, named bases. Trump Jr. got caught saying that the Kentucky Confederate flag, state flag, was a part of a proud tradition. There's nothing wrong with proud traditions. Uh, in other words, he was defending the same thing that the Nazis were marching as far as General Lee and the Confederacy. And he was bragging about how the sports players were unpatriotic son of a bitches, that they didn't stand for the national anthem. And so this was taking place way before the riots broke out. And Trump was the reason for the riots to break out. Because everybody was fed up with his hate rallies and insensitivity towards civil rights. Trump even said that after January 6th, he said, "Oh, my crowds were bigger than Martin Luther King." If you have to look close to see how packed they were, packed in close. And then he said that his speech in January 6th was better than Martin Luther King "I Had a Dream" speech. Now he's comparing himself in January 6th, that somehow he was better and more dignant than the "I Had a Dream" speech. In other words, the speech that he gave in the Ellipse before his supporters committed insurrections and killed two Capitol Police officers. They implanted two pipe bombs in the DNC headquarters to blow up Kamala Harris. They wanted to hang Mike Pence, and Trump, after the fact, said that he could see why they wanted to hang him. That's what he said about his supporters while they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." After the fact, he said he could see why they wanted to hang him. And this is the same character that's saying that that day was better than Martin Luther King, that he had bigger crowds than Martin Luther King, that his speech was better than Martin Luther King "I Had a Dream" speech. So this is not the first time that Trump has treated African American civil rights with indignity. There was a whole year of hate rallies denigrating sports players. There were football players kneeling. There were basketball players kneeling. There were baseball players kneeling. And for a whole year, he kept on calling them unpatriotic son of a bitches. That they should all get fired because they're disrespecting the flag. They're being unpatriotic. They were just Kaepernick was doing the same thing Martin Luther King was doing. So kneeling and bringing awareness to civil rights. With chivalry, trying to bring awareness to civil rights by praying to God for awareness to the plight of racism. In 2016 in Chicago, there were civil rights activists inside a stadium when they were assaulted by white people. While Trump was saying, in the good old days, they'll be carried out of here in a stretcher, meaning the 1960s. And I'll pay for your legal bills, meaning paying for his supporters to assault black civil rights activists at his rallies in 2016 in the Chicago Stadium. So Trump has been rubbing salt in the wounds of African American civil rights in this country ever since he stepped on the scene in 2016. And all of that was building up frustration inside the inner cities of African Americans. His insensitivity, callousness. And it's self-evident how he's going to compare January 6th and denigrate Martin Luther King, to say that his crowds were bigger than Martin Luther King, that his speech was better than I Have a Dream speech of the great Martin Luther King, to even compare January 6th that somehow is bigger and better than Martin Luther King. That January 6th incident, when they wanted to blow up the first African American vice president with 2 pipe bombs, when they wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi, where they wanted to hang Mike Pence, he got the indignity to go on CPAC and brag about that somehow he had bigger crowds than Martin Luther King, and when Martin Luther King was in the Lincoln Monument, and that somehow his January 6th speech was way better than Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech. We're living in a country where white, piggish, blatant racism of apartheidist, fascist, alt-rights, with extreme terrorist militias that believe in apartheid, not only against African Americans, but against Latinos, against American Arabs, against American Asians. These conservative alt-rights are rooted in pure elitist, partizan, Angloed, apartheidist racism in this nation. That they stand behind a leader, an occult leader of their making, of Trump's base, that subverts the will of the people. Minorities in this nation, whether we be American Latinos, whether we be American Africans, whether we be American Arabs or American Asians, we don't like to be subverted in our own country. We don't like to be considered second-tier citizens. We don't like our votes to be drowned out. It was 3 million votes that Hillary Clinton had more than Trump, but somehow she lost. They were trying to do the same thing to Biden. He has 7 million more votes than Trump, but they was trying to impose martial law and subvert us as minorities. They're trying to do the same thing for 2024 behind this piggish leader that they call their strongman. Trump said about after January 6th, they wanted to kidnap the governor of Michigan and execute her in a firing squad. These extremist white militias. Atomwaffen divisions are a Nazi militia behind Charlottesville. They want to start a civil war and use nuclear dirty bombs against American peoples, meaning minorities. And Trump doesn't chastise none of them. He doesn't disavow them. He whistleblows to them. After Charlottesville, Trump kept on bragging about General Lee, how he was a great general. He always knew how to take the high ground. Unfortunately, his last battle, he got caught on low ground, and you know how that went. He said that at one of his rallies, while he kept on showboating about General Lee, General Lee, General Lee. They asked him, do you want to ban the Confederate name bases in the Pentagon? He said, no, that's part of a proud tradition. There's nothing wrong with proud traditions. Trump Jr. said the same thing about the Kentucky Confederate flag, that it should have never been abolished. There's nothing wrong with proud traditions. You gotta understand, the riots that happened, the African American riots, it because Trump kept on denigrating them at his rallies. Somehow, he was insinuating that the black peoples of this nation are unpatriotic people. that they're disrespecting the flag, that they don't stand up for the national anthem. And he was doing that for a year, way before the riots broke out. So you got to understand, when Giuliani was going to swing states with the big lie to try to displace 7 million popular votes, you got to understand where those votes come from. They come from the inner cities. They come from neighborhoods that are Africans, neighborhoods that are Latinos, neighborhoods that are Arabs, neighborhoods that are Asians, minorities. That somehow it's taboo to be a minority in this nation. If you're not part of the Western culture of Americans, you're somehow not a true American. And that's what Trump's base is all about. That's what his rallies are all about. It's about xenophobia. It's rooted in Trump's insensitivity towards minorities. And how are we to take it when they try to displace the popular vote and try to appoint themselves delegates to just appoint a fascist dictatorial leader, that Trump is so insensitive that he's going to compare January 6th and denigrate Martin Luther King by saying that the January 6th incident somehow was way better than Martin Luther King's. You got to understand, we don't want to live under the yoke of this type of fascism. We don't want to live under the yoke that governors get kidnapped and sentenced to firing squads, that any leader can be hanged, or any other leader can be blown up with pipe bombs. Or it doesn't matter how many citizens vote, their votes don't count. When the president has more sympathy for Charlottesville Nazis and General Lee than he does minorities. And now they're going to try to impose themselves for 2024. Like Lindsey. You know? You can hear his love for Trump when it comes to xenophobia. And his accent, Southern accent. It's leaders that are fascists, that are rising behind Trump, that are extremists. Because they understand what the minorities are going through with Trump in this nation, but they can care less. Because they're willing to cater to the founding father Anglo'd Western European Americans. They have xenophobia against Latinos, migrants, but they have a nostalgia for the Coney Island migrations from Europe. That's when Americans can live the American dream. That's when America's golden years. But migrants that are brown or Africans coming to the southern border, oh no. These are criminals. These are inferiors. These are shithole people from shithole places. These are rapists. These are anchor babies. He said about an illegal migrant pregnant woman. He said, a woman illegally pregnant will try to cross over illegally, squat down, drop a baby, and want us to take care of this baby from the cradle to the grave. You know what I call this baby? An anchor baby. He said that at one of his rallies. They call us wetbacks. They impose the fruit companies on the southern manifest destiny of South America, and they call those banana republics. Because every time they say, oh no, this is not a banana republic as far as America, and the white ring media, they got a cliche, they say, oh, this is not a banana republic. Because they like to impose banana republics on southern countries of South America with manifest destiny to enslave us to pick bananas, but somehow they refuse to be considered. Oh, we impose banana republics, but this is not a banana republic. And then they got Nazis marching around, you will not replace us. And then Chris Carlson Tucker, calling that the great replacement theory and praising the theory that somehow America Anglos, traditional ethnic groups are being displaced with brown migrants. That somehow this country is losing its values because the inflow of brown migrants. And to me, this is all rooted in the inferiority white complex that Trump cultivated in his rallies since 2015 to the present day. It's an apartheid bigoted movement with people like Sessions, Senator Sessions, and Lindsey, his Southern Scarlet, and his Casablanca. But I tell you what, for 2024, I bet you there will be more popular votes against Trump, but they will try to still violate the Republic by imposing Trump delegates. You know what Bill Barr said? Bill Barr said Trump was trying to steal the 2020 elections. He was trying to steal it. There was no evidence. He was trying to overturn the college electoral system. And then when he wrote his memoir, he said, but if they nominate him again for 2024, I'll vote for him again. These are people that are callous and they can care less about the laws of the land. The only reason Bill Barr jumped, because he was afraid that Trump was about to get prosecuted for 2020, the insurrection. So he got scared and he testified and said the truth at the January 6th depositions. But then when he wrote his memoir, after the depositions, he came out with his memoir. And this is the Attorney General under Trump. He said, yeah, Trump was trying to steal the elections. He was trying to overturn the college electoral system and appoint Trump delegates, and he was trying to overturn a free and fair election. And then the reporter asked Bill Barr, would you vote for him again? And Bill Barr said, yeah, if they nominated him again, I'll vote for him again. These are people that they are hypocrites when it comes to the Constitution, when it comes to the laws. It's all about bigotry in this land. That they are fervently obsessed with their cult leaders. Because he's fighting for their insecurities of apartheid's bigotry, of inferiority white complex and conservative alt-right bases of Trump. That they feel like this country is being displaced by Africans and Latinos. And they're trying not only to subvert us, but to impose their fascist, totalitarian, autocrat, dictatorial against the will of the people. When you try to ignore 3 million for Hillary Clinton's majority votes, when you try to ignore 7 million for Biden, it makes me think like these people don't know how to count. Or they can care less like Bill Barr.